right, here we go. So the name of this talk is Spirit is Breathing Through Me. The song was Spirit in Me by Michael Gott. So we're going to be talking about the Upanishads, what they are. We will be talking about an overview of them, a little bit of their history. We will be talking about 10 powerful ideas by Rupa Pai. We will be talking about Brahman, Atman, the creative force that produces all living beings, out of which everything comes, the all that is everywhere, as well as in the individual self. We'll be talking about the nature of consciousness, which moves from one body to another, and the self as pure consciousness. We'll be talking about the secret of happiness is about letting go, about not chasing after anything in the material world and not clinging to anything or anyone, as they are all temporary. That which is material never lasts. We'll be talking about Brahman is the only power that is eternal and unchanging. So let's just go ahead and talk a little bit about what are the Upanishads. They are Hindu scripture. The Vedas are considered the oldest and most authoritative of the Hindu texts. So the Upanishads are the philosophical text that explains all of the concepts that are in the Vedas. Their central concern is to discover the relationship between rituals that they do. They're very much into rituals, and the cosmic reality, including all of the gods. They celebrate many different gods, and the human body person. They provide spiritual knowledge and enlightenment, guidance on how to achieve knowledge that can provide salvation from the cycle of birth and death. So depending on how you count them and what year you're talking about, there's somewhere around 108 Upanishads. The one that we study the most, there's 108 of them. The first dozen are the oldest and most important ones. They were referred to as the main Mukhya Upanishads. They are found in the concluding sections of the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, and they are memorialized, passed down orally. They're written about 2,800 years ago, somewhere around 800 and 500 BC. The word Upanishad is a Sanskrit word that means near the enlightened one. So Upa is near, Ni is down, and Shad is sit. So it's about listening closer to your teacher, your spiritual guru, and absorbing all of that information. They are also known as the Sanatana Dharma, meaning eternal order or eternal path. So unlike other scriptures, the Vedas are not thought to be revealed to a certain person at a certain specific time. They were believed to have always existed, and that there were sages that worked really, really hard to be in touch with that spirit, and that at some point the sages were given these messages, but it was not given to one specific person. It was not given on one specific date. It was given to a bunch of different sages, and those sages passed them down orally, and eventually hundreds of years later they were written. So the Vedas are regarded as what's called Shruti, meaning that which is heard. So there are 4 Vedas: the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, the Yajur Veda, and the Atharva Veda. Each Veda is broken down into 4 different parts: the Aranyakas, which is about rituals and observances; the Brahmanas, which is commentaries on the rituals; the Samhitas, which are benedictions, prayers, and mantras; and finally the Upanishads, which are philosophical narratives and dialogues about everything that was written before. So they are the best known and the most read of all of the Vedas. They come in dialogue narrative form. They were the first to be translated into other languages. The Vedas, as they are spoken, are thought to reproduce the exact sounds of the universe itself at the moment of creation and onwards. They take the form of hymns and chants. The Upanishads are considered the end of the Vedas. So all of the Vedas, there are 4 different Vedas. At the end of them, they each have Upanishads, which sort of sum up and explain the meaning of everything that went before them. They are the final word on each of the Vedas. They give the foundational understanding of all of Hinduism. So different scholars say there are 180, could be up to 208 of them, but the ones that we know, again, are the 108 in the 4 Vedas that I said to you. The main subject described is metaphysics, so the principles of reality. Questions such as, who am I? What is the highest principle that exists? The teachings play out through conversations, debates, and stories. So before Western science, the rishis of India were investigating the nature of consciousness. Consciousness is not a product of the material world. So later, obviously thousands of years later, all of us in this Western world try to find consciousness by looking at the brain. And there are people that think there are physical ways you can see pathways through the brain, and you can see the way all of the thoughts are made through the different chemicals and all like that, and that produces consciousness. But thousands of years before, they said, no, the consciousness is not something physical at all. It comes from a whole different reality. It cannot be perceived by the senses of the body. It resides in an altogether different space that is untouched by this world. The consciousness is the unchanging aspect of who we are. It is the self, or the Atman. So they believe there are 5 different parts of the self that they call koshas. The first is the physical body, which is constantly changing and decaying. The second is the prana, or the life force, which governs our energy. The next is the mind, which has a constant stream of thoughts. The next kosha below that is that which allows us to understand and discriminate in the world. And beneath that is the realm which is blissful and full of boundless joy, and that is where we find the Atman. Beyond all 5 levels of these koshas, however, of who we are is something foundational, which is witnessing, knowing, and experiencing everything. The rishis declared that the self, which is pure consciousness, is encased in material reality. It moves from one body to another. The fate in your next life is decided by the deeds which you do while you are in this physical body. So self, reincarnation, and karma, those are all what define Hinduism. But behind all of that is Brahman. So I'm going to be talking about Brahman the most today. It is everything that comes from. Everything comes from Brahman, everything goes back to Brahman, and everything is sustained by Brahman. The ultimate principle, according to the Upanishads, is literally everything, this Brahman, literally everything. It is the source and the ground upon which all of creation exists. The world is full of people, animals, trees, and other living beings, but all of it is Brahman. Brahman is considered Sat, which is existence, which is unchanging, Chit, which is consciousness, and Ananda, which is infinitely blissful. The Brahman, which underpins everything, is actually us. Our essential nature as the self is the same thing that provides all creation. Atman is Brahman. There are differences between us, though. So there are various schools of thought. If you look at Hinduism, there are like 19 different branches of Hinduism, and they range from people that believe that the Brahman and the Atman are the same, it's one thing. And then there's the other extreme that believes it's 2 completely different separate things. And then there are people in the middle that believe that it's something joined together, but it's not totally separate. There are different types of Hindus. Some believe that the creation and the various souls are the body of the Brahman, and the Brahman itself is beyond it all, ruling everything from inside. Fundamentally, we are all divine beings, and we can all experience this firsthand. The Upanishads shows us through inquiry into our own existence, we can know the magnificent truth of life, and from there, we can see the glory of God. So I pulled some quotes from the Upanishads, pretty wide-ranging, but I wanted you to get a sense of what they talk about all the time. So number 1, the immortal Brahman alone is before. That Brahman is behind, that Brahman is to the right and the left. Brahman alone pervades everything above and below this universe, is that supreme Brahman alone. The knowing self is not born, it does not die. It has not sprung from anything. Nothing has sprung from it. Birthless, eternal, everlasting, and ancient, it is not killed when the body dies. The wise man beholds all beings in the self, and the self in all beings. For that reason, he does not hate anyone. It is indeed the mind that is the cause of man's bondage and liberation. The mind that is attached to sense objects leads to bondage, while the disassociated mind from sense object tends to lead toward liberation. The self that is subtler than the subtle and greater than the great is seated in the heart of every creature. One who is free from desire sees the glory of the self. through the tranquility of the mind and senses and becomes absolved from grief. Knowing that great and all-pervading self by which one sees the objects both in the sleep and in the waking states, the intelligent man grieves no more. Liberated from the grip of egoism, like the moon after the eclipse, full, ever blissful, self-luminous, one attains one's essence. He who perceives all beings in the self alone and the self in all beings does not entertain any hatred on account of that perception. So those are just some of the quotes that I wanted for you to say. So we're going to talk about 10 powerful ideas from the ancient India, wisdom of the Upanishads. This is written by a woman named Raja Pai. Raja Pai actually is a very well-known author of children's books, and she won awards for writing the Bhagavad Gita for children. So if you can look her up, you can, she's very well known for her children's book, but she also is a lecturer, and she founded Bangalore Walks. So she says that the sages spent years preparing themselves through internal meditation, which was intense, to receive the messages from the Upanishads, looking for answers to questions like, where did the universe come from? What is the nature of reality? When I say I, who do I really mean? My body, my mind, my emotions, my intellect, or something else? Ancient rishis shared among students that they considered worthy. So you had to be worthy. They weren't just spilling it out to the public. You had to sit in front of them. You had to be working with them over a period of years, and then they would share with you these secrets. Upanishads don't speak of God, but of the entity that they call Brahman, which is all-pervading energy, cosmic consciousness that is formless, genderless. It is because of Brahman that the universe exists. From Brahman, the universe proceeds, and to Brahman, it returns. Brahman takes on the form and the name of a diversity of being and non-beings that we see all around the world. The world outside us has changed over the last 3,000 years, but inside us, we still have the same struggles. We are still tortured by the same demons, false hope and doubt, heartsick with grief and despair, driven by rage and jealousy. That hasn't changed. So she gives us 10 major ideas that she thinks can help us. The first is the secret of happiness lies in letting go. Everything you consider to be yours is not yours at all. Remember, we talked about that a lot last week. Why cling so desperately to wealth and fame and power and joy and hate and love? Why hold on to people so tightly? Instead, treat your time with them as a precious gift. When they leave, as they will, as everything is transient, let them go and cherish the memories. 2, our successes are never ours alone. Instead, it comes from a variety of factors: our own determination, our perseverance, our hard work, our discipline, but other things such as our lineage, our upbringing, education, natural talents, social and economic status, our race, and what some people call luck, and what other people call divine grace. Detach from the success, offer it to the universe with an attitude of gratitude. When we can do this, we can also detach from all our failures. Number 3 gives the story of a teenager who watched his father give away these sick old cows as charity. He confronted his father saying, this isn't really doing anybody any good. This isn't really charity. They're sick and they're old and they're going to die. And his father got very angry with him and said, leave me and go kill yourself. And the kid did. The kid killed himself, but so impressed was the Lord of Death with his honesty and hunger for knowledge that he returned him back to the living and revealed the secret of death, that only the body perishes, not the self. Most of the story, she says, has a moral that's about the responsibility of the young to be fearless, idealistic, to question and challenge authority, tradition, and injustice. And the job of the adults is to listen, and to listen well. Number 4 is the story of 6 seekers. After years of study, they had questions that they still weren't able to figure out. And so they went to this ashram and they went to the sage and said, we've been studying for years and years and we can't understand all these questions. Will you help us? And he said, I will help you, but you have to come live with me for a year. And you have to do all the same chores that everybody else does. You have to chop wood, you have to graze the cows, you have to clean the ashram, you have to cook the meals. And they said they were willing to do that. And so after a year, they said, can we ask the questions? He said, yes, now you can ask the questions. And so he answered all of their questions to their happiness. They were able to understand and they were agreed to all of the answers he gave them. And this teaches the lessons about learning, that the student must demonstrate a commitment to learning, hard work, patience, and humility. The teacher does not lecture. They encourage the student to ask questions, that learning is in fact a two-way process. It is a dialogue. There must be an atmosphere of mutual respect, and that way both parties gain. Number 5 talks about the story of these two birds that were best friends. You probably heard this. There are a couple of different versions of this two-bird story. And again, throughout the different Upanishads, they are said differently and they are translated differently. But this particular one is about two birds that live in this tree, this big fruit tree, and one is on the top and one is on the lower one. And the one on the bottom, the lower branches, is always chasing after all the fruit, always hungry. Even if he's eaten so much fruit that he's going to be sick if he eats more, he keeps on eating more because he's so afraid that he's going to get hungry again. So he eats and eats and eats. The other one is all the way higher up in the bird, and he's perched in the light among the higher branches. He is content. He is not tempted to eat extra food. He calmly watches the frenetic activity of the bird below. The lower bird at one point ate a piece of fruit that was rotten and got very sick and got very upset and remembered her friend that was a higher bird and looked up at her sitting in the golden light and decided, let me fly to her. She can give me comfort and she can teach me what I need to know. So she flew to her, and as soon as the lower bird entered the light, she became the golden bird. There had never been any other bird. The higher bird was the purest, noblest part of herself. We often chase after life like the lower bird. We should be more like the golden bird. Stop looking outside of yourself for validation, gratification, and happiness. Instead, turn your gaze inwards to where you are, luminous golden bird, and you will understand you are totally 100% complete within yourself. Number 6 is this concept of the 3 states of consciousness. The first is the waking state, where all senses in the mind are full and alert and completely active. The second is the dream state, where the senses have been withdrawn, but the mind is still active and gives us dreams that seem just as real as waking life. And the third state is this deep sleep, not just the mind, but the intellect and the emotions and everything else we know has been withdrawn and is in repose. And we are aware of nothing at all. But you wake up saying you had such a wonderful sleep. Who is that I that speaks? The experience of deep sleep, who is it that is experiencing that? What is that fully alert person where everything else was in repose? That is the true you, the only you, that self that is unchanging, eternal, and beyond death. That self is called the Atman. Number 7. In the ancient tradition, there were residential schools where people would go away for 12 years. They were dormitories. They would stay there and they would live there. And they would study with gurus who gave them advice on everything. And at the end, the gurus would give them like a little commencement talk and give them some advice to go on their way. And so one guru said, practice right conduct while learning and teaching. Stay true to nature while learning and teaching. Do your rituals while learning and teaching. Have children while learning and teaching. Practice austerity, compassion, tranquility, self-control while learning and teaching. According to Hinduism, one of the biggest things in life is to keep yourself open to new information and to be willing to take in advice from your elders. This is also a sacred cycle of give and take. If your cup is full of happiness, hope, wealth, and fame, share it with the people who have less than you do. Number 8 is that there are 4 great pronouncements. Number 1 is that knowledge is God. Number 2, that knowledge that helps you see beyond the differences on the outside of all of the being and non-being around you to the sameness on the inside. Number 3, that same vital spark of consciousness within you that is carried by every other being in the universe is the same. It's the same spark. And number 4, every being has as much right as you do to live and thrive. Number 9. So this the young adult went away to study for years and years and came back to his dad and was saying to his dad, how smart he was and how much he had learned and how he was ready to confront anything in life now, and he had it all together. And so the dad said, "Bring me a fruit from the great banyan tree," said the father. And he said, "Now cut it open, and what do you see?" And the son said, "I see tiny little seeds." He says, "Now cut them open, and what do you see?" And the son said, "I see nothing." And the father said, "It is from that nothing that the great tree grows, because of that nothing that it exists at all. Nothing contains the essence of everything that may be. It is the seed of every immense, incredible possibility." Number 10, and here's the biggie, last but not least. You are not created by God, you are God. Brahman is the cosmic consciousness. The energy that makes the universe possible is no different from Atman, the individual consciousness, the energy that makes you possible. The purpose of your human life is to realize this truth. Start believing that you are luminous, magnificent, strong enough to do anything you want to do, large enough to contain the universe. Each one of us has the capacity to be far bigger, far better, far more powerful, far more generous, far more compassionate person than we believe possible. It is our job to embrace that truth. Don't settle for being merely human. Behave like the God you truly are. So here's what I know. Every single ancient text that we have studied has pointed to the same reality. Most religions call the force of the universe that created us all and sustains us all and keeps us all alive God. In Hinduism, they call it Brahman. And all the major religions, philosophies also agree that the force that upholds us, gives our lives meaning, our intuition, which points us in the direction of the right or wrong, lives inside us, as well as inside every other created being in the universe. And the thread that seems to run through all of them is that there is some code of ethics we can all agree on, some basic understandings of right and wrong, and some sense of priorities. Every single one of the belief systems that we have studied holds to the truth that the one source, God, energy, creator, is to be valued and esteemed and made a priority. Living in a state of remembrance that the power that created us and all the other living beings is to be honored, and that we are to understand that the power that rules the universe is not us. The power is in us, but there is something greater than us that holds all of the pieces of the puzzle together. As we remember that fact, everyone seems to agree that gratitude needs to be one of our highest priorities. In God, Brahman, spirit, that force is within us. If that created all of this, and if we make our relationship with this power a priority, then gratitude is the glue that holds that relationship together. God breathes through us. We don't make our hearts beat. As we sleep, all of our body functions continue to do exactly what they are intended to do. We don't force ourselves to breathe. It just happens. All of the healing that takes place when we get off track, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, all of the healing comes from that life force which created us. Sometimes medicines and doctors and therapists and healing modalities are called in. Sometimes support groups and people are brought in. They all come from God. God is watching over us, and when we reach out, there is always some form of reciprocal communication. Lessons have to be learned. Joy and sorrow and health and healing, when we get out of alignment, the God, creator, Brahman energy, they are always present in us and through each other and all around us. All of the major spiritual teachings are built on the premise that there is a force which existed before us and will exist long after we are gone. The force, call it what you may, is powerful, strong, loving, generous, omnipresent, omniscient, able to hear our prayers, able to send us messages through our intuition, and able to sustain us through all of our daily trials and tribulations. That force loves us unconditionally, every moment of every day. That force is inside us, outside us, and all around us. God, Brahman, the creator, that spirit is breathing through us. And so it is. Remember, at all times, the power is in you. It always has been, and it always will be.